Corrit. Just a brief overview of the business. Ministerial briefing on the update on legacy, departmental briefings on the implementation of Generating Our Success, Northern Ireland Youth Strategy, and a review of leadership and management, and then the Committee for Employment running our own legacy report. Members' apologies.
Bronwyn will be late.
Bronwyn will be late, so the only one we have at the minute. Members, just under Chairperson's business, just advise members an informal meeting with the Minister for Employment and Learning and the Committee for Enterprise and Investment regarding job losses in Bombardier has been arranged for today at 2:30 in room 144, Parliament Buildings. The Minister has confirmed his attendance with Michelle Bell, Head of Assured Skills, Pauline Miller, Assistant Director of Employment Services, and William McGuinness, Invest NI Client Manager, Aerospace and Defence. The Minister of Enterprise, Trade and Investment has declined the invitation. Just also advise members, if we do not obtain quorum at next week's meeting, we need to agree the following today: that in case of correspondence for committee which arrives between this meeting and dissolution, a standard letter will be issued stating that the committee has no further meetings, but the correspondence has been forwarded to its members. Members, are you content?
Yes.
Members also content that I sign the minutes of today's meeting when completed, if necessary. Okay, members, draft minutes, page 6, draft minutes of our meeting on the 2nd of March. Members agree that's a true record of that meeting?
Yes.
Okay, and a sign has been accurate. Members, page 12 is agreed action points from the meeting on the 2nd of March. Members agreed with those action points as listed?
Yeah.
Okay, members, moving on then, correspondence, page 17, and also tabled at page 3. Page 17 is a departmental response from the committee request for further information regarding the European Social Fund. Members content to note. Page 34, departmental response to committee correspondence regarding department capital projects. Members content? Okay, members, just then all other actions listed as agreed unless indications to the contrary. Okay, members. Members, tabled at page 11, there are 3 invitations listed. If members wish to attend any of the events, can you inform a member of the committee staff and they'll make the necessary arrangements. Okay, members, draft forward work programme, page 38. The draft forward work programme indicates our final meeting of the mandate. Members, Bronwyn, in her absence, has been contacted by the Law Society last week. And
She went down with the Committee for Justice.
Right. Do you want to brief?
Okay. Bronwyn went down to meet the Law Society last week with the Committee of Justice, and she met a chap called Alan Hunter, and they were talking about our inquiry into post-1910, and he thought it would be useful if we had a lunchtime seminar with some of their members, and basically the idea was they'd provide lunch at 12:30, and then Robin would speak at 1, and then there would be a panel with questions and answers from the different lawyers that are there. The suggested date is the 23rd of March, which is during recess. It's a Wednesday, and the suggested time is 12 to 2, and it's in their premises in Victoria Street in town, in Belfast. They did say, you should note that they did say that they couldn't guarantee how many members of their members would turn up, as barristers are laying things and getting their books in order, etc. So before I respond, I want to know whether members were keen on doing this or not.
I wouldn't be able to come, no.
Let them know I'd be content to go if
Okay,
that's
right.
well. I'll carry the lot of these.
Robin consent to go.
Okay, members, moving on to agenda item 7 then is the ministerial briefing, update on legacy.
Grateful to Will. And what?
Good morning.
Good morning.
You're very welcome.
Thank you,
Again, and
Thank you, Chair.
much for coming along. Over to you.
Right, great to see you. What I'm proposing to do is just to go through some of the key issues over the past 5 years, but also just run through some of the issues that are still live. and will probably be carry-over issues into the new mandate of the Assembly, and just to give a sense as to where we need to be going on some of those. But first of all, Chair, can I just thank the committee and in particular yourself as Chair for the very strong, constructive working relationship over the past number of years and the past 5 years in terms of some of the members of the committee. Obviously, there's been a few issues and disagreements with the department, but by and large, I think we have worked collaboratively around a number of key issues, and in particular over the past number of months as we approach the end of the mandate. I think the manner in which both the department officials and yourselves were able to engage did enable quite a lot of product to get over the line, which is much appreciated. In terms of the wider perspective, I think at the first instance it's important to reflect on where we've come from and what we're about. Skills and bringing people into the labour market is the key way in which we are going to transform the Northern Ireland economy. And Northern Ireland has historically had a low base in skills, so there is an urgent need to transform that situation. So over the past 5 years, we have seen a rise in the number of qualifications. We have seen improvements in skill levels, particularly in relation to STEM outcomes, and we have seen, again, some progressive labour market improvements as well. I think notably, obviously, we're in the context of a very volatile economic situation. But whenever we all assumed office in 2011, the claimant count was in excess of 60,000. Today it's below 40,000. So we're seeing some very good progress in that regard. I like to think that we have a full suite of policies and programmes in place, and dare I use the term strategy. I think we have the full comprehensive set of strategies across every aspect of the department's work, and obviously there is now a challenge to ensure that we continue to deliver upon those over the years ahead, and indeed whoever's in our places, both at a ministerial and in a committee role. Some of the important landmark achievements include, in relation to higher education, that we have the first ever higher education strategy, also a strategy in terms of widening participation, and that we are keen to ensure we protect Northern Ireland's very good record in terms of widening participation outcomes, notwithstanding the fact that there are some particular pockets of difficulty. We have seen an increase in terms of the STEM undergraduate places. Obviously, there's a challenge in terms of university places overall. We've also strengthened the local research base, and we have set in train a process of doubling the number of publicly funded PhDs over the course of the decade as well. In terms of student support, which is an issue I'm going to come to in a bit more detail later on, and the wider higher education finance piece, I've seen obviously tuition fees being frozen during the lifetime of this outgoing Assembly mandate, and we've also protected in cash terms other means of student support, notably the maintenance grant. In terms of further education, I think we have further transformed that sector, where it is now seen as being very much the first point of call in terms of support for the economy, both in terms of upskilling and also to a growing extent in terms of innovation. We have made some important improvements in terms of the estate, and just to put on record today, which will probably be of particular interest to you as Chair and probably to Claire as well, the business case for Northern Regional College is now cleared, and that's been communicated to the college, so they'll probably be announcing it formally in due course. But I can say that the business case is, drumroll, confirming that there should be a rebuild on the existing site in Coleraine, and also the redevelopment and consolidation on the Farm Lodge site in Ballymena. So you can.
Ballymoney, Minister.
What about the rest?
Ballymoney?
Yeah.
No, well, obviously the Coleraine one is going to be a consolidation of the provision in the northern end of the catchment area, but there will be some continued engagement with Ballymoney by NRC. But we can come back to that particular point. We also have the apprenticeship and youth training strategies, which I think are going to be absolutely critical as we go forward in terms of the development of professional and technical training. I think that's something that will become increasingly important over the years to come. We've had, obviously, the Pathways to Success strategy for NEETs, and the work is ongoing in terms of a refresh of that strategy that will probably spill over into the next mandate. We've engaged with industry, particularly through the a series of working groups, for example, around ICT, advanced manufacturing and engineering. Also, the Assured Skills programme has been extremely successful. And a few other developments of supporting the economy would include things like the Science Festival, which again had its second year just a few weeks ago and was again extremely successful. In terms of employment law, obviously we've had the Working Families Act and also the Employment Bill passed by the Assembly recently, which is now awaiting royal assent. And hopefully we have encouraged a much stronger focus in terms of alternative dispute resolution. In terms of probably the frustrations, by far the biggest frustration lies in terms of the current budget situation. And there's no point in perhaps rehearsing how we ended up in that situation. But we have had a major impact in terms of our skills base. I think we have the policies in place to ensure that we invest in skills as efficiently as we possibly can, but we need to be investing in scale, and we are hampered at this stage through the lack of resource. And I suppose in terms of looking ahead, we do need to see how we can continue with that skills transformation and the implementation of the strategies. Finance is therefore going to be absolutely critical in that regard, and I would regard corporation tax as both a major challenge in terms of ensuring that we have the skills required to meet the expectations of growing companies locally and potential investors coming into Northern Ireland. But it's also an opportunity for us just to consolidate the arguments around the need to invest the skills base. And I think we have seen the beginnings of that with the recognition by the Finance Minister of the need to invest more in our skills base, with the commitment that there will be another £20 billion provided to the new Department for the Economy for Skills to be transmitted during the June monitoring round, and that will be baselined in due course. One particular aspect that I do want to draw people's attention to is in relation to the higher education situation. And I'm just going to pass around, it was slightly unorthodox if Anna and Claire can pass those down the table. Later on today, we're going to publish a paper, which is essentially an options paper in relation to higher education finance. As you appreciate, we're faced with a major structural funding in terms of higher education, and we've also had the cuts to higher education, which have come on top of that as well. So there's a major crunch in terms of our financial situation. There's also a need to expand higher education in order to meet the future growth needs of our economy. So later on today, we're going to publish, in effect, the outcome of the big conversation process, but it's now evolved into an options paper in terms of higher education. So within that, we are setting out what are the cost pressures and a series of options in relation to the funding of that. As such, as a department, we're not taking a particular stance on any of the options. The purpose of this publication is to ensure that as people approach the forthcoming election, and as after the election, various parties will sit down to begin to work through a forthcoming programme for government. Whatever option they wish to choose to address the structural deficit in terms of higher education, it's important that the debates during the election and discussions that happen after the election are properly informed by the cost implications of what's involved. So what I'm basically, in short, saying, if people want to suggest that we fund higher education through public funding, which perhaps is the conventional wisdom on the way forward, it's important that people are fully aware of the cost implications that arise from that in terms of other competing pressures within our block grant. It's also worth stressing as well in terms of the expansion ambitions. Those are largely based around the work we've done in terms of the skills barometer. The figures there are based upon provision across Northern Ireland, but I'm sensitive that people have an ongoing ambition to see expansion in terms of the UU campus at Magee, and those expansion figures could encompass any expansion of Magee. So there's a reconciliation between people's ambitions to expand Magee and what is a more evidence-based approach in terms of assessing the ongoing pressures in terms of expansion to ensure that we are fit for purpose in terms of planning for corporation tax. So that two-page summary is just the executive summary of the document. That will be published formally this afternoon, and we will communicate that to the committee as well as part of that process. A few of the other issues that are live at this stage include, first of all, the apprenticeship levy, which we discussed in the Assembly yesterday, and that is an issue of significant concern, and particularly in terms of the distortions that it may bring to Northern Ireland. In terms of economic inactivity, again, we have a strategy agreed by the Executive for which no resources have been allocated to date, and that is clearly a major gap. And I expect that there will be a target in the forthcoming programme for government that will involve seeking to address the issue of economic inactivity. But so it's important that people remain focused on trying to get that strategy operational as soon as possible. That will be transferring to the new Department for Communities in terms of as our employment service transfers across. In terms of employment law, there's probably two still outstanding issues. One is around tribunal rules, and that is probably an issue that will probably fall in terms of the new committee in June. Work is at an advanced stage in that regard, but it's unlikely that it's going to be something that will be something we can take over the line this side of the pre-election period beginning. And I'm sure Phil will be particularly pleased to know that our officials have begun work in terms of a paper on 0 hours contracts, which will form the basis of engagement with stakeholders and a fresh consultation. But that will be something that will hit the desk of the incoming minister. But the work has commenced in that regard to enable the new minister, if he or she chooses to do so, to move quickly in that regard. Coming back to the FE capital situation, we have a lot of business cases that have now been improved, including most recently with respect to NRC. So there is a pressure building up in terms of the need for capital investment to fulfil all of those. So apologies if I miss anywhere out, but that includes Armagh, Banbridge, Craigavon in terms of the southern area, Ballymena and Coleraine obviously in terms of the northern area, and Enniskillen, and there may well be potential in terms of the northwest as well. But those are the projects that are live and await full capital investment. There are also ongoing issues in terms of youth unemployment and long-term unemployment, and while our figures for unemployment overall have improved, we do need to be conscious that within the profile of unemployment in Northern Ireland there is a particular problem still with young people, albeit that figures are better than they were several years ago. But also in terms of long-term unemployment, more of our unemployed population are long-term than would be the situation elsewhere in the UK. Also issues around gender inequality in terms of the segmentation of choices and also participation in the workforce also remain very important issues. There will also be the conclusion of the Management and Leadership Review. I think you're getting a presentation on that later on today. It's likely that will fall to the incoming department to finalise. I think there's a particular logic in doing that, given that Invest are also involved in some aspects of management and leadership, and that ensures that there's a full synergy in terms of the finalisation of that. But you will certainly get a picture today and a flavour of the ongoing thoughts. And the final thing I want to mention, which is probably the most current for the committee, is around the learning disability transitions issue and the inquiry that the committee undertook. Officials are working away on the basis that by the end of this week in time for the committee packs for members, there will be an interim response from the department to the different recommendations. I do want to underline the term interim in two different respects. First of all, it is a very immediate response. We would normally circulate this to other departments for them to respond to recommendations that primarily fall to them, but obviously the time isn't going to allow that to happen, so we'll have to note that some of those are for other departments. But whenever we call it interim, it means we will, or I hope that the successor department will then come back to the committee with a second iteration of the response. So whenever we use the term interim, it's meant in the sense that I want to make sure this committee, because you have done the work in terms of the inquiry, are given the opportunity committee to engage with officials around the outcome of that report and to hear the initial response, with the recognition that more work will be done. And as I committed in the Assembly as well, we will be circulating the paper around the Executive and formally asking that it becomes an agenda item for the next meeting of the Bamford Subcommittee, with a view that the Learning Disability Transition Action Plan will be updated to take into account any recommendations from the inquiry that ministers believe should be taken forward. So, Chair, hopefully that's a fairly broad sweep around the different issues, and apologies if I missed anything on people's agenda, but I'm sure we'll pick all those up during questions.
Okay, Minister, thank you very much. I suppose starting off with your first announcement this morning here in regards to the NRC business plan.
Yeah.
I'm sure Claire will be very pleased with the announcement on Coleraine, but I must express my disappointment in regard to Ballymoney.
Sure.
Because it has been a stay of the town for some particular time, and there was concerns raised about the implications from students in and around that area and where they would travel to.
Yeah.
But I'll wait to see the announcement and the business case. But have you any indications of NRC's commitment to the town?
I think that's something where further discussions can be productively taking place. I think that there has to be a commitment to working with the community in Ballymoney around some particular aspects of further education. So I think we're pushing an open door in that regard, but I think it is worth, certainly yourself as chair of the committee, having a discussion with the principal of NRC, and certainly as a departmental perspective, we're more than happy to reinforce the importance of continuous engagement with Ballymoney. I mean, I certainly appreciate the sense that happens at times that a place like Ballymoney sort of feels that everything is sort of rationalised towards Coleraine or towards Ballymoney, and it's never rationalised into Ballymoney as such. So that's clearly an issue in terms of ensuring that there is provision across the piece. However, I think overall there is a very strong need for the Northern Regional College area, both to consolidate its estate and also to renew its estate, because it is perhaps the area that has had the least amount of investment in recent times, and there's a need for that now to be prioritised. And certainly as we look in terms of the different capital programmes that are out there and bids, just because Ballymena and Coleraine have been the most recently approved in terms of a business case, doesn't mean that they're necessarily at the end of the queue in terms of finance. So if finance becomes available, we start at the top. There will need to be a process to ensure that there is a proper allocation in terms of resource. I would also expect that in terms of what is likely to be prioritised in terms of NRC, in terms of redevelopment, probably the Ballymoney consolidation in the Farm Lodge will go first, ahead of the Coleraine Ballymoney issue. So there's not an immediacy around the Ballymoney issue.
One of the things you gave us quite a good briefing on the departmental achievements over the period. You must claim count of 60,000, which has dropped. Economic inactivity,
Yes,
is still large, live issue. Do you think the strategy is going to address that?
well, there's no absolute guarantee that the strategy will succeed, but we certainly have to try in this regard. And like you, I'm hugely frustrated that we haven't been in a position to commence work on the implementation of that strategy. It really does stand out that we have the highest figure in the UK. It's been a major structural problem in our economy for the best part of 30 years. And it's not that we're just marginally worse off compared to any other of the 12 UK regions. There is a significant 2 to 3 percentage point gap. So the fact that we have a strategy is good. We've shown leadership that far, but much more needs to happen in terms of implementation. So there is some degree of hope. If you reference the Fresh Start Agreement and the commitment to address error and fraud in terms of benefits, and the possibility that will produce savings in terms of AME monies at the Treasury level, that our executive can recoup 50% of those savings, and that document does suggest that those savings can be directed amongst other outlets as youth unemployment and long-term unemployment to assist economic inactivity.
In regards then, one of the pieces of the work that ties in with economic inactivity and the work that this committee does in regards to needs, have you, as part of your legacy, going to be the work that has been done to tackle those young people who are not in employment, education or training?
Well, I think we have a very good strategy in place in terms of pathways to success, and obviously that did build very much upon the report and inquiry that was done by the previous Employment and Learning Committee. And it does show, and maybe this may well be an encouragement in terms of how the Learning Disability Transitions report will be treated. Those reports can very much inform the development or refreshing of government strategies in this regard. At present, a lot of the funding streams that were used in relation to that NEET strategy have now been dropped due to the inability of the Executive to continue resourcing them beyond March 2015. The primary focal point for the delivery in terms of support for NEETs is now through the European Social Fund, but the strategy remains relevant. We have had the inclusion report, which was presented to the committee a few months ago, which has given us a very detailed analysis of our performance in that regard, and officials are currently working in terms of just revamping the strategy, given that it's now 2 or 3 years old. And again, I hope they will be reporting on that back to the incoming committee.
Minister, just picking up in the two questions, economic and activity, there's a strategy in place. NEETs, there's a strategy in place. There's no money behind the two of them, so yes. Where's the feeling for putting the money in it? Does it lie with not taking the problem seriously, or is it other ministers ring-fencing their own budgets rather than...
Yeah, well, I'm careful to sort of make a plea for these particular strategies at the expense of anything else that the Executive is doing, but across the board there is a huge issue in terms of resources, and decisions have to be taken around how we're going to have a more strategic budget. That, to my mind, involves trying to address some of the money we're spending in terms of managing division in Northern Ireland. From my own perspective, I know this is not universally shared by other political parties. We do need to engage in some version of fair, progressive forms of revenue raising. We do not have enough resource in the system to do all that we need to do. I would stress that investing in things like economic activity and working on those young people who are not in education, employment and training isn't simply about investing in skills, as very important as that is. It's also about ensuring that we are investing in the transformation of society and getting other outcomes. So whenever we talk about the problems that we have in terms of the health system and rising demand, if we have people who are in employment who are successful in terms of their training, they are less likely to have health conditions that will be creating additional demand in terms of the health service. So there's a virtuous circle in all of this. So whenever we talk about the need to invest, for example, more in health, that is as much about investing in areas such as economic activity and investing in NEETs as it is in investing in direct health services.
Revenue raising, you touched on, the paper you presented there, you passed around.
Yes.
9 possible options. Come out of your big conference. You want to touch briefly on any of them?
Well, I am. I'm loath to go down the approach of really picking one option above others. I want to stress that, from my perspective, and I think this is reflected to an extent as well in terms of the comments that have come from our universities, we have to recognise that the current system is not sustainable. We have a structural deficit, which has grown up over the past number of years, and we have the more recent cuts. If we allow that situation to continue further, we are in danger of undermining the quality of our offer. So we go out around the world saying, come invest in Northern Ireland because of the quality of our people, based on the quality of our universities. That message will begin to ring very hollow if we don't fix this problem. There is essentially a choice to be made, which relates to either you go for a bigger contribution from students or you go for a bigger contribution from the state. There is a challenge in terms of the state trying to make up the shortfall, because you do need to be constantly investing and reinvesting. And even our friends in Scotland, who have a model that's based around very heavy focus on state support, have seen the value of their investment erode over time, and that challenge of ensuring parity with what's happening in other parts of the UK is one that's very real for them. But it is possible to do that through state funding. So my only plea is that whatever option we decide, that we ensure that we generate the sufficient resource to ensure that we have a modern higher education system that is financially sustainable. My instinct is that there is an aversion across most or all political parties towards an increase in student fees, and they place a value in terms of access and not deterring students. However, if that is the position that people wish to adopt, and they're perfectly entitled to do that, they must understand that in turn there is then an obligation to invest a significant amount of additional resource to ensure that we have a fit-for-purpose system.
Thank you. Phil?
Thanks, Robin and Stephen. Thanks for coming. I'd firstly like to echo the remarks you made at the start about collaborative working. I think the way that you have engaged with this committee has been very beneficial to both of us. I would commend you on it, and I think more ministers should adopt such a collegiate approach in terms of how they deal with committees. So thank you for that. Firstly, in terms of HE and HE funding, I think one of the biggest challenges you've faced has been the disinvestment in skills and the wider education sector. And that's a result of the major financial pressures that have been put onto your department. And when you look through this paper here, it identifies a requirement for nearly 250 million in the next 3 financial years to close the funding gap to deal with the cuts that have been imposed and to meet expansion ambitions. And meeting that gap needs to be a priority for the next cohort of MLAs that are elected here. Yes. But looking at the 9 proposals that you brought forward, none of them look great. You know, it either requires a significant increase in tuition fees, which I don't think anybody reckons is a good idea, or a substantial increase in the level of state funding, which is going to be challenging with the constraints that are being placed on our budget from the British government. But I don't think we can adopt a position of doing nothing. Your status quo position first talks about student contribution being 4,200 in 18-19, but the current cap on tuition fees is £3,925. Does that presume that the inflationary increase in tuition fees will remain after the Assembly election?
Yes, that would be our working assumption. Unless you're about to tell me otherwise, but that we are probably very close now to the 4,000 mark, and it may well be it's either 2016 or 2017 that we will, on the current trajectory, that will pass through 4,000 as the tuition fee. I think that is certainly 16-17 is 3,925. Yeah, so we're close. We're going to go through the 4,000 at the next round then, and I think that is reasonable. The bottom line is that if the preference of political parties is not to do anything beyond an inflation rise, if we want to see a higher education system that is fit for purpose, this paper gives us the figures that are required to make that a reality. What I would say is that in the context of a lower rate of corporation tax, this debate is no longer a luxury. It is an absolute inescapable requirement. If we don't invest in higher education places in sufficient volume, we are going to see several things happen around corporation tax. First of all, we will see companies forced to perhaps look elsewhere for skills. And it's great that people are coming into Northern Ireland to work, but I think part of the rationale for corporation tax is about generating more local employment as well, and so the frustrations will build up if people aren't skilled to sufficient level to take advantage of the jobs that may be created. We could also see potential for wage inflation. Now, it's fine that wages are going up, that's a good thing, but if that's going up in an artificial way ahead of where the market needs to be, that's a problem. And how that will happen is that if company A invests and then builds up the base, and then company B comes in a year later and then basically pinches all their staff, you then see considerable churn in the system, and Company A will be extremely miffed by that. So that is a danger. If we don't have sufficient volume coming through, that's what could happen. And again, that would undermine our credibility. And more generally, if once the word gets out that we're not able to meet the skill requirements under corporation tax, that will just undermine our ability to seek that type of investment. So there's a very real danger here. I would actually argue that we need to be investing more in the skills base ahead of the fact of the time about naming a date and a rate, but the executive have gone ahead and named a date and a rate. So this now is absolutely urgent. We are behind the pace in terms of what we need to do. So the executive don't have the luxury of putting us on the long finger for a year or two. They are going to have to take a decision in May as to how they're going to ensure that we are able to invest in sufficient volume. Because bear in mind, for a graduate, there's at least a 3-year lead-in period.
Somebody has plucked a figure of 30 or 35,000 jobs that may be additional if the rate of corporation tax is harmonised in this island. Has any actual work been done to give a breakdown of what level or what proportion of those jobs will be for graduates, which of them will be for skilled trades, and the knock-on impact that will have on the demand within HE and FE institutions?
Absolutely. If you look at the skills barometer that we published in November, that gives you all of those figures as well. I'll ask for that to be recirculated to the committee, so you have full sight.
But it goes into the level of detail that there are a projected 30,000 additional jobs and X percentage of them will be for graduates.
It gives us a breakdown by occupational area and also by skill level. Now, in the context that we didn't have a lower rate of corporation tax, we probably are just about at the right level in terms of graduate provision, but there would have been a major pressure in terms of level 4, level 5, the intermediate skills. In the context of the lower corporation tax scenario, there is huge pressure across all skill levels, particularly at higher levels. So the greatest pressure, nonetheless, remains at level 4 and level 5, where the further education system comes into the zone, and our apprenticeship strategy is particularly relevant. But it gives you the projections by occupational area for graduate employment, and that is, I think, a very innovative means by which we can plan for the future.
You see the 9 options you've put forward on this side of the page?
Yes.
Do they give any to the fact that there's a 244 million deficit on this side? Or are the two things tonight?
Yes. That's reconciled in terms of.
Do all of these proposals meet the funding gap that's on the side of the page?
The proposals, to an extent, well, some of them will meet the situation in terms of the existing level of provision. And some of them will take into account the additional provision. So at the bare minimum, they will take into account the need to address the structural gap and to address the funding cuts that were passed in 15-16.
So it replaces the funding lost?
Yes, but some of the options on the second side also take into account the expansion. Now, the expansion figures are based around the skills barometer analysis in terms of where the pressure points are going to be and in what areas. So there would be a much heavier focus around STEM subjects, which are obviously slightly more expensive than the.
But that'll all be detailed in the report you're putting out later?
Yes.
Okay. Does it do anything to the Mason cap, or does it leave it at its current levels?
Well, we're looking at, for example, in terms of the expansion ambitions, that would take into account additional places that would move us beyond the current Mason level.
Okay. In the event of an EU withdrawal, what will happen to the rights of workers that are currently protected through EU directives? Can you give us a guarantee from a procedural point of view that no rights that workers have accrued through the imposition and the EU directives that will be automatically lost?
Well, see, the difficulty is that, shall we say,
Need to get into the politics of it. I'm not restraining either.
avoiding the particular regulations that come from the European Union is one of the rationales that those who wish to leave are advocating as to why they want to leave. This notion that it'll suddenly free up business. So if we leave the European Union, then I mean all bets are off in terms of regulation. However, that presupposes that domestically a national government wouldn't want to put in place regulation, and as you know and appreciate yourself very directly, the Assembly itself has been at times keen to put in place regulation at different points. So any national government would nonetheless regulate, and if we end up in terms of trade agreements being negotiated on a piecemeal basis, as part of those there would be an expectation that as part of the single markets that they would be creating, that there would be a common regulatory framework, which would include workers' rights. Now, the rationale there is to ensure that there isn't a competitive advantage for one trading nation relative to the other, as opposed to direct concern for the interest of workers. But nonetheless, the interest of workers has to be an important consideration. Ultimately, just to be very clear, I'm very much for staying in the European Union, and I don't believe that what we have in terms of the social aspects of Europe are something that undermines our ability to have a successful economy, and that we have a huge amount to gain from being part of the single market, and trying to recreate that is going to be extremely difficult, and also very time consuming. And
But just from a procedural point of view, I'm trying to find out whether any of those historic regulations that we have put in place will automatically be repealed if we leave the European Union, or will they remain in place?
Well, I'll try to get our officials to give you a formal response on that, but I think that probably requires a fairly detailed sort of legal perspective in terms of exactly on what footing they are in
Has that been done
place.
yet? No?
Yes.
Has that not been done yet?
Well, I'm working on the assumption we're going to be staying in.
Okay.
But the issue lies in how we exactly the legal standing of whenever we transpose a directive into domestic law, that then it becomes part of our domestic law, so it wouldn't automatically be unpicked. But the ability of, in the event of the UK leaving the European Union, then the national legislators, or indeed a devolved legislator, could unpick those, because there wouldn't be any requirement to meet the European directive.
But you're confident it wouldn't happen automatically?
Well, it's unlikely to happen automatically.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Phil. Gerard?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Stephen, for the briefing. I have to say, obviously I've come to this late myself in terms of the totality of your work, but I have observed it from the outside, and I should say that I do have to commend you for the work that you've done during your period as Minister in very, very difficult circumstances, I think, particularly given the financial constraints that you've had to face and the choices and the pressure. And I think therein lies part of the difficulty, Chair, I think, in all of these situations, because very often it would seem to me that individual ministers have been the point of anger for people when certain things aren't delivered, and there hasn't been, in my considered view, the kind of collective responsibility that we need to have across the executive in terms of these choices and decisions that we make, and the implications of those. I just wonder, in particularly in relation to skills and issues that you've touched on, the economic inactivity and obviously needs, various things, the particular problems that relate to somewhere like my own constituency of Foyle in the North West, where there are very, very specific problems. And yesterday we had a further jobs blow with the demise of one of our department stores, Austin's, which was there for over 200 years. It just seems to be that we've lost so many jobs over recent years, and with the demise of the textile industry and so forth. And I know that you've listed various initiatives, and that this is not exclusively the responsibility of your department, even as it currently stands. And obviously we have to be mindful of the fact that in the new mandate things are going to be going in different directions as well. But I wonder, just reflecting on your period, aside from strategies, I'm slightly worried about what you're saying about the implementation capability of some of those strategies. What can be done on the basis of equality, looking at redressing regional imbalances? I know that the cake has got smaller, obviously, and that we're all operating in the context where there's less money to do things. But then what needs to happen then is sharp attention needs to be brought to those decisions on the basis of what we spend money on and how we target inequality. And you touched on economic inactivity. It's a huge percentage of economically inactive people in the North West, and in Derry in particular. That's a massive problem that we have to get to grips with. And I just wonder, reflecting on that, I'm particularly interested in that, because I think that is tied in to, Chair, with the higher education piece, because I think, although it may not be the solution to all our problems, there's no doubt about it that the investment in the expansion of Magee would be a pump primer for Derry and for the North West region in general. When we look at the example, Chair, of the Republic in particular, and I know that there have been a lot of economic problems there over recent years, given that they crash, but it's no accident that the economy of the Republic is currently recovering 3 times quicker than our economy, because there has been the requisite investment in higher education there, as well as the cut in corporation tax. So I just wondered, in totality there, what are your reflections on that in terms of the need to target initiatives to particular areas?
Sure. Let me just first of all say, in terms of the threat around implementation strategies, it doesn't lie in terms of capacity of the civil service and wider stakeholders to deliver. It is probably a challenge exclusively in terms of the resourcing. In that regard, obviously, the economic and activity strategy is the most acute example of that, in that there is currently no resource apart from about less than £1 million, which is being piloted through DSD in relation to the North West, as a matter of fact. The issue of particularly economic activity and unemployment, we do see significant variation across Northern Ireland in that regard, and the North West is a particular challenge, and the figures in that respect are quite frightening in some ways, and it's almost getting to the point that almost 1 in 2 people between the ages of 16 and 64 in parts of Northern Ireland are outside of the labour market, and that's a completely shocking state of affairs and something that isn't sustainable in terms of any economy. So there's a real imperative in addressing that. In particular, that strategy was looking to a lot of devolved piloting work, and the expectation would have been that that would have had a very strong sub-regional focus, and would have wished to target the areas where the problem was most acute, rather than simply applying it uniformly across Northern Ireland. At the same time, I do want to stress the importance of, while it's important that we address the regional imbalances in Northern Ireland, that we also encourage labour mobility. It's important that we don't overly seek to micromanage where economic activity happens, because we need to let employers make those decisions for their own particular reasons. But we have people with the skills and the ability to engage in employment opportunities where they come. Now, labour mobility is an issue in Northern Ireland, and there was a report that we commissioned a couple of years ago, which we can send to you, and I'll ensure a copy is forwarded on to you from that. This shows that actually in parts of Belfast, presumably parts of the North West, people's ability or the conception of how far they're willing to travel can be extremely narrow. In other parts of Northern Ireland, that window is considerable, 50, 60 miles potentially, so there's a massive variation in terms of labour and mobility issues. Also, with respect to the situation in Derry, I mean, I fully appreciate the importance of the expansion of the university, the multiplier effect that comes from it, the ability to build up a strong rationale for investment. I mean, universities can be a focal point for investment, so that becomes in turn a particular focal point for decisions to be made around job creation. We are currently in the process of finalising the business case. It is, shall we say, going backwards and forwards between the respective parties on a number of points, but I'm keen that that is finalised as soon as possible, because again, I think if people want to make any decisions in relation to McGee, and I'm going to be a slightly clairvoyant and suggest that in the foil consistency over the coming weeks, it is going to be one of the issues during the campaign, and will be cited by various candidates with commitments being made in that regard. But I want to make sure people are fully aware of the cost implications of the expansion of McGee, so we're not making any commitments in a blind way. The one slight qualification I would make in terms of prioritisation is that if we look at the need for skills interventions in the North West, the bigger pressure point does not necessarily lie with the pool of graduates. It lies in terms of the low and intermediate level skills. So if you ask me to make a choice, I mean, I would say that what is absolutely essential is we address levels of unemployment and economic inactivity in the North West. It's also good that we expand McGee, but addressing the levels of economic inactivity are absolutely essential. Unless we crack that, the North West economy is not going to take off ever.
And can I ask you, in your view, when the new executive sits down with the Department of the Economy, with the Department of the Community, and they're making decisions about key decisions about, and I take your point that the private sector decides where it's going to locate, and that there are issues around mobility, but I can tell you, speaking to somebody that travels up and down the A6, I think you might be shocked by the numbers of people that leave Derry day and daily on buses to come to Belfast to work and go back again. But I know that's not unique to Derry, but there are an awful lot of people that come from that point. But I think do you think that those departments, when they're sitting down and making those decisions in the new dispensation, should have equality at the heart of that and be looking as their first point to see where are the regional inequalities in this society and how do we redress those, and the resources
Yes.
should be fixed to that?
Well, I certainly think it is a factor. I think if we were to say that is the first point of reference in terms of decision making, I think that would be overly restrictive. It's certainly something that has to be taken into account in decision making, but it can't be a first level filter that everything has to pass through in terms of decision making. There's a need to maximise economic growth and investment across the piece. But I have no doubt that you will see firm commitments around issues that are relevant to the North West, around the road infrastructure, both A5, A6, and
We've had them before.
had them before. Well, we'll see. and commitments in relation to expansion of McGee. I mean, there's a will to try to get that done. I just want to make sure people are fully aware of the costs in all of this, and we're building on the foundations, a solid foundation. I think there'd be a huge mistake if people try to expand McGee. Almost like building on top of a shaky foundation. We have to fix the foundations and then expand McGee, but we can do both.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jared. Anna?
Thank you, Chair. Really want to congratulate you, Minister, for a very impressive list of achievements. You certainly have left behind a very good legacy. And I know the FE and HE sector, from recent conversations with them, that they do appreciate you and find you to be a really effective minister. I'm not just saying this because Stephen is my party, right? But this is from the sector, comments that I picked up recently. And I think the committee here too, we do appreciate your cooperation, and we really worked well with the department as well, departmental officials. And I think we also appreciate your very speedy action in responding to our inquiry as well. I think it is important that if you start the work going and put your stamp on your support for the inquiry, I think it helps us on the way as well. So just very quickly about, I know this is just a very brief paper, is this the end of the big conversation now?
In effect, yes. I produced a paper to the executive in December before the budget was struck, setting out the cost implications. It's fair to say that the paper we're publishing later on today would have a very strong read across with the executive paper. Now, those figures weren't taken into account in terms of the 16-17 financial year budget. We did. We also put in a paper in relation to the financial requirements in relation to a lower rate of corporation tax at the same time, and the two read across with one another. In January, you will have noted that the Finance Minister did make a commitment to an additional £20 million in relation to skills. So I see that as basically bottoming out the fall we've had in recent years. It's important that people appreciate that the 16 million cut that was announced for 15-16, we've only just seen 1/3 of the impact of that. So that is still in the system, and so it's still likely we will see a drop in places in terms of September of this year. But what that additional resource will allow us to do is to stop any further cuts happening in terms of university and college places. But it's not going to allow us to expand or to address the structural problems. So the figures that are here today are to inform future decision making by both political parties ahead of the election in terms of what they may be saying in their manifesto, so they have the proper costings if they are going to make commitments around expansion of universities or anything else, and also that is a focal point for the incoming executive in terms of decision making, that they have the proper figures available to them as to what is involved in terms of ensuring we have a modern fit for purpose. So in effect, this is the conclusion of the big conversation in terms of the options that are available.
Yeah. Are you advocating any particular model?
The only thing I'm advocating is that we fix the problem and that we...
You're not prepared to say anything?
We have to have a sustainable model of higher education. I think the universities are of a similar mind. What they want is something that allows them to support the economy of Northern Ireland in terms of skills and research. There are different pathways through which we can achieve this. That's for the executive to reach a consensus around. The people may well have a presumption that some models are less achievable than others, or it's less likely that there will be political agreements around some. But it's important that we have an open, frank discussion around all of this. And if ultimately we want to do this through state support, we know what we have to pay.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sana. Claire?
Thanks, Chair. I am delighted by your announcement this morning. I've been working on this for over a year, as you know, because we've spoken about it often. I will reiterate the Chair's comments, though. I do think it is disappointing about Ballymoney. My priority has always been that we get it at Corium, but it will provide a big gap within Ballymoney where I do have interests. There's a lot of community and voluntary work that goes on there, which feeds into the local FE college. So if there could be some way that could be saved, I would certainly advocate for that. But no, you're right to say that the Northern Regional College has been forgotten up until now, so I do think this is a result. So right before the Assembly dissolves, I really am pleased with that, so I really can't say any more. So thank you.
May I get a mention in terms of election literature, perhaps?
Yes, definitely.
Don't worry, I will.
Can I just reiterate? Can I just reiterate in terms of the rationale, in terms of the decisions that are taken in terms of NRC? But this is not about simply just trying to reduce the number of colleges in isolation of other concerns. The NRC does need to consolidate its estate in terms of management and how it works in a more cost-effective way. Ultimately, there's also a need to ensure that students in the area have modern, state-of-the-art accommodation. And while this is sort of very, very early days in this regard, I think you can take considerable encouragement from how people are responding to some of the recent FE investments. For example, E3 in West Belfast has been extremely well received. The space facility in Bangor is up for awards in terms of the RCIS. Phil, maybe of interest to see the ambitions for the college in Enniskillen and how that they're going for some of the top accolades in terms of a green building, in terms of being environmentally friendly. And I'm sure whenever we come to detailed design in terms of the NRC, that there'll be similar ambitions in terms of that. And that's all about ensuring that students have the very best facilities in which to learn and to train.
And just to add to that, Chair, I think right across the NRC campus, from Newton Abbey down to Magrafoot, they're offering fantastic courses, but the students just aren't coming because the facilities aren't there. So I do think when this new build, gets started, the students will follow, and they deserve it, because the FE sector is something that I think, to an extent, we've undervalued, and in terms of really adding to our skilled workforce, it is necessary to do that. So I think for once we're actually respecting young people, and great news. So thank you.
Okay. Fran?
Chair, thank you. And just when you were halfway through your presentation on Ballymoney, I see Claire, her thumbs were going mad.
That's it.
It's probably,
How's the Wi-Fi connection?
by the time we leave the meeting, it'll be all over. Claire Sugden has just got the...
That's it.
Brilliant, good politics here.
Scoop.
And just before a touch on the NEETs thing, and I know that you mentioned E3, and I have to say it's as a complex, it's wonderful. I think that there's some great stuff, but there was some concerns that it wasn't working at full capacity. That a lot of the flagship, as far as the Belfast Met was concerned, was the Titanic, and that the investment and the students weren't being directed towards that there for the courses that they had, and it had been raised to me quite a while ago. But to touch on the needs thing, and it's something that I've laboured on for quite a while. And I do understand that from yourself and certainly from this committee, that they have focused in quite a lot on needs. And I think one of the difficulties that we do have is that, and I've said this in the Assembly, that a big lot of the focus and attention has been on the higher level apprenticeships rather than giving equal focus and attention to needs and apprenticeships. And I know that I think you said that your department would be revisiting or relooking at the whole thing. And I think what's missing in the whole thing is that there are many people out there in community settings, and whether they run community buildings or they think that have excellent relationships with people that would call themselves needs, whether it's through their youth element of it, whether it's through their local education. And sometimes we completely miss the point when we're dealing with needs, that they're the people at the cold face of it, they're the people that can actually deliver the thing, and they're bypassed and how you deal with this. And partnership is an often abused word, because there are those less equal than others when it comes to forming partnerships and actually working with people, and they need to be those community structures need to be brought in centre frame to work in genuine partnerships, and I think that's when you'll start to see effective results from dealing with people who are needs.
Good. Okay. Well, let me say two things to you. First of all, in terms of E3. We will try to give you some indication in writing just around the balance around the provision with E3 and other facilities. However, I do want to stress that E3 is getting, shall we say, the blue ribbon type courses within the BMC wider estate, and in particular, it is the centre that is used for the assured skills. So, whenever we're working with investing companies coming to Northern Ireland and putting in place the programmes that are required to turn graduates into workers in these new growing companies, it's the E3 complex that's used for that within BMC. So, whenever we bring over investors to look at the infrastructure we have, in terms of the tours, they're not just going to Titanic, they're going to E3. So E3 has been actively being promoted as very much key to the whole upskilling around the outward investment. So it's not a bolt-on, it is absolutely central to everything in that regard. In terms of the wider point around NEETs, I probably shouldn't really be saying this, but I'm going to anyway. One of the
should I get my phone out?
I think it's fair to say that one of the priorities for the incoming Department for the Economy is likely to be a more fundamental review around level 1. So whenever I talked about that, we're doing looking at a refresh in terms of the pathways strategy. What Pathways is doing is part of a wider landscape and a wider interface in terms of what happens in terms of further education and what happens elsewhere in terms of community provision. And it's probably fair to say that we need to go through a cycle in terms of review of departmental strategies and interventions. And there are some strategies that we have in place, for example, the youth training apprenticeship strategies, which I hope will have a very long lifespan and will be fit for purpose for a considerable number of years. One of the issues that we do need to look at afresh is what happens at the layer below the youth training strategy around level 1. And I think there's a recognition from senior civil servants that something that will be early in terms of the programme for work, in terms of the new Department for the Economy, will be a more fundamental review of what happens at level 1. So I've no doubt if you are returned at the election FRA and are repositioned under the Department for the Economy, that you'll be taking a very keen interest in scrutinising that type of work.
Thank you. Just one thing in terms of comment on no. Jared rightly focused his attention on regional variations, especially in Derry in terms of employment. And there is this impression, and he talked about the buses heading towards Belfast. But the city of Belfast, there's two different Belfasts. There's the city of Belfast that has some of highest unemployment rates in the 4 constituencies that exist. In fact, I represent Livnick in the Falls area, and it's jammed between the 2 biggest employers, the RVH in the city centre, but it still suffers from all the highest kinds of deprivation.
Yes.
So, and I've always got in this debate to know that where there was a whole rush on to move government departments out, and I agree with it. That sometimes in communities within Belfast, they're lost for that type of investment also.
Yes, it's also about the skills to ensure people can access the jobs. So even simply just dropping employment into an area doesn't guarantee that that's the case. I mean, a similar thing we're very conscious of is the Ulster University expansion in North Belfast. Now that has to be a generator of change and in terms of new investment in the northern part of the city centre. But it's also important that it's spillover effects in terms of employment opportunities for people from the wider North Belfast community and elsewhere, of course, as well. But there's an opportunity there. But that won't happen automatically unless we invest in the skills of the residents of North Belfast to be able to access employment opportunities that may come along.
Thanks. Okay, thanks, Rob. Deputy Chair Tom.
Thank you, Chair. And I suppose the outset to commend you, Minister, with the others around the floor today for the way in which that you have dealt with the committee over the term, and even in tight financial strains, what you've done, and how you've kept the committee updated all the time. And I think it is an example to the other ministers how they should work with the committee. And I know you're not a member of my party, but you never know what would happen.
I suspect not.
Where's your phone from?
But it shows exactly how there's the working relationship between the minister and
The Gaelics will have concerns about that. Though.
But
Never even lifted his head.
I suppose when we move forward into the new dispensation and into the Department of the Economy, there is the concern and the fear at times that some of the work that has been done could be swallowed up within that department. And while there has been the issue of the universities, and you have sent out a paper showing some of the things there, my concern too is for the education colleges that are doing a great delivery out in the rural areas, and I'm thinking on the southwest colleges in that area. And I suppose it's the ability for them to continue to deliver on what they're doing and to continue building on what they're delivering. And again, there is a funding problem there. Yeah. As we move forward, how do you see that they're going to be protected? We'll have a big conversation and they're tied into that. But it's keeping them protected as well, that they're able to continue delivering and building on the good work that they are doing within those areas and again, it's people who are economically inactive and you know, all those types of people that they are catering for and delivering for, and we need to see that continuing. How do you see that?
Well, absolutely. You're right to raise that concern. We can take some comfort, however, in the fact that I think the FE sector has positioned itself a lot better in recent times, and its relevance is much more widely understood and respected across the piece, including by all of the members of the committee. And indeed, College and I are doing a good work in that regard of ensuring that there is that understanding. FE in Northern Ireland, despite the pressures financially, is in a good state of health, and whenever you look in terms of the recognition that's given to our FE sector at a UK level, it puts things in perspective. There has been a neglect of FE in England over the past number of years. It's not taken as seriously by government as universities and apprenticeship routes, which are maybe channeled through companies as opposed to the colleges in terms of off-the-job training. So, when, for example, your own Southwest College has been recognised as one of the very best STEM colleges in the UK. You're going to see that in terms of the quality of the new building in Enniskillen, for example, and how that's going to be recognised at a UK national level. all of our colleges have received different forms of accolades in terms of that level. If you look at something like World Skills and UK Skills, Northern Ireland punches well above its rate. Hope I get these figures right, but if you throw your mind back to last summer and the UK team that went to Brazil to compete in World Skills, the number of competitors from Northern Ireland was way beyond our share of the UK population, and the number of medals that were won was outstanding. I think if Northern Ireland was there as an independent country in its own right, not that I'm advocating independence for Northern Ireland, just to say, but we would have perhaps been something like 10th or 11th in the league table of medals. So maybe that's a positive sign for the summer in France, but who knows? So it shows how strong the sector is. Now, that said, with change, there'll always be concerns. The budget of DEL is considerably bigger than that of DETI going into the new department, but DETI have perhaps more reach in terms of different types of activity, whereas DEL is more focused around the skills and employability issues. It is incumbent upon the officials and indeed the new minister for the department to make sure that there is a proper working culture in that. That's not going to be created overnight, but needs to be created very quickly, and to ensure that there is proper integration of skills alongside all of the other economic measures. That's the rationale as to why we're doing a new department of the economy. So there's no point in having FE in a silo by itself or higher education in a silo. There has to be proper synergy across all of the pieces. I think we can also take considerable consolation from the fact that if you do any evidence-based policy making, and I go back to the skills barometer, the biggest pressure point, whether in corporation tax or without corporation tax, is around level 4 and level 5, where FE comes into its own. Skills more generally is absolutely critical to transformation of the economy. Every investor will talk to you about skills. Some will talk about tax, but not all, but they all talk about the skills base. So any rational focus upon economic outputs has to go back to the FE sector if you want to achieve those. So we should have confidence in that.
Thank you. Thanks, Tom. Minister, thank you. Minister, just a very quick one, maybe you can answer today. One of the things we talked about was student loans. I think it was in last week's presentation, and there had been a request about going to monthly payments rather than quarterly payments.
Yes.
One of the rationale, or part of the rationale for not being able to do that was because it would cost the student loan company to upgrade its systems.
Yes.
Just in your financial projections for 16-17, I see there's a bid in for 2.8 million to the student loan company to upgrade its computer systems. Could there be something done to tie those both together?
In principle, the issue about the frequency of payments is something that I'm open-minded around. There is an issue in terms of the capacity of the student loans company. Again, our friends in England have overburdened it, and it's creaking at the seams as we speak. There are some important asks in terms of policy that we need to get implemented through that, and that includes what we're doing around the part-time loans. We're also hoping before the end of this mandate to make an announcement in relation to post-grad support around masters, top masters. But that's perhaps several weeks away from being made. The difficulty with the issue of the frequency of payments is that is how we justify taking money from elsewhere in the higher education settlement to pay for that. That means a knock-on loss elsewhere in the system. And I am loath to do that. And I know people can say, well, perhaps you can bid for more resource coming in, but even if more resource was coming in, then we need to prioritise fixing the structural gap. So, to be perfectly frank, until we address the funding gap in higher education, I think the frequency of payments will have to be a secondary consideration behind that. Now, there is an issue in terms of the infrastructure of SLC to continue delivering around existing policies, and also policies for which is an important rationale, which includes the part-time, because that is important in terms of expanding provision. I was talking last night to one of our trade unions, and I'm unfortunately missing the Union Learning Conference this morning to address yourselves. But in terms of people who have been in the workplace, obviously progression into, for example, part-time higher education is an important progression pathway.
Phil, very briefly.
This is already happening in Scotland. You know, there are
Yeah.
payments being made on a
Yeah.
10-time basis over the course of the year. So I don't understand why there's a requirement for student loans coming to upgrade its IT when it's already doing it in Scotland.
Well, they need. Well, it's something that needs to be done, but it's not just a case with the student loans company. It's also there's wider admin costs that will be several £100,000 for us, and you can say it's only a few £100,000. It's no big deal in the big scheme of things. In a situation where we are cutting university places, I find it incredibly difficult to justify moving the frequency of payments ahead of restoring places and actual opportunities for students. In Scotland, they're not cutting university places, and that's the big difference between us and them, Phil.
Okay, Minister, thank you. But before finishing, just I think on behalf of the committee, I just reiterate what the Deputy Chair said. Thank you very much for your engagement with the committee. It has been frequent, and it has been open and honest, I think, at times, and we do appreciate that. We have had our different opinion over a number of occasions.
Yes. I can think of a few particular issues.
I'm not going to ESF at any point, but I think the support that you gave through your inquiries as well has been beneficial, because it made them worthwhile, and hopefully the one that we've just completed in special educational needs will still carry on in both legacies from the department and from this committee. So, Minister, on behalf of us all, thank you very much for
In closing, just again stress my own thanks and appreciation to the Chair and all the members of the committee, and indeed the staff, for their cooperation with the department and the usually good-natured exchanges that we've had. I think the product over the past 5 years is in many respects a shared product across both the department and the committee, and that's the way the institutions were designed. The committee is not just there to shout at the Minister and to make noise, it's there to be helping and advising in terms of policy making, and I think you certainly have made a powerful contribution in that regard. And it's not farewell, I'm due to see some of you this afternoon as well for a special meeting around Bombardier, so that's a very particular issue that obviously we need to address too. So for now, au revoir.
Thank you.
Round of applause or stand ovation?
No. The issues are far too serious, so but thanks nonetheless. Thank you.
Okay, members, moving on then, agenda item 8, departmental briefing, implementation of Generating Our Success, Northern Ireland Youth Strategy. Can I just welcome Ms Yvonne Crosky, Director of Youth Policy and Strategy Division, Mr Philip Rogers, Head of Apprenticeship Reform and Implementation Team, Mr Clement O'Cushy, Head of Curriculum Development and Delivery Model Branch, and David Myers, Review of Youth Training. Clement, apologies there for your second name. I'm not sure. I appreciate the effort.
Good morning, Chair and members. Thank you for providing us with an opportunity to present to you on the youth training strategy this morning. We last presented on it back in June 2015 in terms of the strategy. Having said that, I was here last month, and as I shared with the committee, there are inextricable links between our apprenticeship system and our youth training strategy, both of which are well underway and making really good progress, and we did touch upon a number of areas. On that basis, Chair, I'm wondering, are you content for us to walk through the presentation, or would you prefer to move straight to questions, bearing in mind our last attendance that we did cover some aspects of the youth training system?
Just a brief update, I think Yvonne will be.
Okay, that's fine. So maybe just to set the scene in terms of the youth training strategy. The strategy is a strategy for all 16 to 24-year-olds in Northern Ireland, introducing a new professional and technical baccalaureate-style qualification and offering both an employed and a non-employed route, giving a broad-based education, but also the skills for work built in there that will be equivalent to 5 GCSEs A star to C. Since the strategy was announced, we have set up an implementation programme, and we are moving forward, as I say, at quite a pace in terms of developing it. And we've titled our youth training system, this baccalaureate, a traineeship. It's being designed and developed, the curriculum, to allow seamless progression from a level 2, that's equivalent to that 5 GCSEs A star to C, right through to allow the young person to move seamlessly into either an apprenticeship at level 3, equivalent to approximately 2 A levels, or alternatively into further learning, or to stay and remain in the job if that's what they desire and what suits their needs. I suppose a key aspect of this new system is the fact that we are joining employability and learning so that we give the young people the skills they need to enter the world of work and the labour market, and ultimately to see a pathway that allows, as I said, that progression routes. As I said, we have an implementation team set up of a series of projects that we're going forward with, looking at how we ensure that we have the correct infrastructure to support all of this. Employers are key, because we need to make sure we have their buy-in in terms of creating jobs and offering employability opportunities for work-based learning experience, which is critical to the whole system. I'll move on, if I quickly can, just to set the scene. The strategy, as I say, was published back in 2015. The key aims of the strategy are obviously to support employers and young people, bringing those two needs together to better meet the needs of our economy, to provide a strong foundation in terms of progression into education, further learning, or to remain ultimately in a job, and that breadth of learning that is recognised, as I said earlier, allowing that seamless progression. We're looking at establishing a series of high-quality network of providers, and I'm sure you will recall Philip at our last attendance shared with you some aspects of the delivery model we are designing at the moment to ensure that we are able to provide high-quality off-the-job training associated with a traineeship for that employed route, and likewise high-quality work-based training experience if the young person hasn't yet secured a job and tasters. We're looking at a network of delivery partners, including FE, specialist employer providers, and other high-quality non-FE providers, looking at what we would deem a high-quality, authorised, approved list. I suppose the crux of the delivery model moving forward is that it's all built around choice, about employers choosing who they want to use for their training for that employed route, and for the young person choice as well, where they would like to go, provided we build in there, and we have done that, independent career advice in terms of making impartial advice, making sure that we take cognizance of the learning of the young person, what experience they have, and what their ambitions are, and where they want to go. So, as I said, we've been working very closely with the Career Service to make sure we build in that impartial advice at key points at entry and as they move towards finishing and completing that non-employed route particularly. I'm going to pass over to you now, Phil, to give a wee bit more detail on where we are in terms of progress to date.
Okay, thank you, Yvonne. Thank you, Chair. Chair, as Yvonne highlighted, obviously the Youth Training Strategy was published in June 2015, and recognising the obvious links between the Youth Training Strategy and the establishment of traineeships and the apprenticeship strategy and apprenticeships, we've taken some steps then to, in terms of implementation, to build on what we'd already started in terms of apprenticeships. So across both our youth training and apprenticeship strategies, as I say, there are a number of shared elements, including the establishment of the Interim Strategic Advisory Forum, which is providing sort of advice on the sort of key implementation issues around both generating our success, the youth training strategy, and securing our success, the apprenticeship strategy. We have also established a series of sector partnerships, as we sort of highlighted too when we're talking about the apprenticeship strategy. We've now 7 of those in place to date, and while their work to date has concentrated mainly on the higher level apprenticeships and sort of trying to get an understanding of getting some pilots established there, they are also beginning to look now at traineeships, and those sector partnerships will be employers working with curriculum experts to ensure that the content and curriculum of both traineeships and apprenticeships meet the needs of employers, and will provide the necessary breadth of education and training, and the important objectives of the strategy that Yvonne's already outlined. In terms of other projects that we're progressing, we have established our funding model project. I'll say a little bit more about that in a bit, but we have established our funding model project to ensure our new system of professional and technical training, so right from level 2, from the traineeship route, right up to level 8 apprenticeships, that is underpinned by a sort of a sustainable funding model which will cover the full range of opportunities. We've been working with our colleagues in Career Service to develop an online portal and on a wider employer support service that will support employer engagement, and again it covers both apprenticeships and traineeships. And I suppose in terms of the pilot activity that we've undertaken to date in terms of level 2 traineeships, I was thinking specifically about traineeships. We currently have 16 level 2 pilots in place. There's approximately 250 participants working through the new pilots, and those are where the training's being delivered through the further education sector, and it covers quite a range of occupational areas, including a number of those that were sort of identified in the recently published skills barometer. So we've got some pilots in engineering, some in ICT, some in construction, health and social care, business administration, and also in hairdressing. If we maybe have a little turn now to the funding model and the work that we've begun there, in terms of developing a new funding model that will underpin the new apprenticeships and youth training system. Both strategies articulate a clear economic and social imperative for providing traineeships and apprenticeships, so that obviously there's the rationale there for government to support that with suitable funding arrangements. As we say, preliminary work has commenced on the development of a cohesive model for apprenticeships and for traineeships, covering both those on the employed and the non-employed route. Looking forward to the next financial year in 2016-17, the Minister has secured a budget of 15 million that will be used then to develop further aspects of the traineeship, the youth training system, and also further aspects of the apprenticeship system, including additional pilots from level 2 right up hopefully to level 8. So that's where we are in terms of implementation to date and the work that we've completed in terms of funding. I'll pass over now to Clem, who'll take you through the curriculum project and the work that we're doing in terms of developing curriculum with respect to traineeships.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Chair. As you've heard, we set pretty ambitious outcomes for the young people who are taking part in these programmes, and that we want to provide a very strong foundation for their long-term participation in the labour market, so anticipating those future trends and also giving them the skills they need to get into employment here and now. And for apprenticeships and youth training both, it's the curriculum that delivers a lot of these wider aims. So as you've got on your slide there, our strategies commit to the development of skills beyond the needs of the particular job role then and there. Also to greater economic relevance by our employers and stakeholders being involved in the development of the content, and a simpler, high-quality awards landscape that our employers understand and are part of. This project is looking at both level 2 traineeships and level 3 apprenticeships together, so that we actually have a really coherent pathway between the two. Level 2 isn't the outcome, it's almost the first step towards their onward progression, so that's why we're taking them forward together. And as Phil said, we're taking forward this project in 2 phases so that we can start to learn the lessons on how we best support employers in this process. So phase 1, as you've heard, we launched it last March, and we have 16 pilots up and running with a number of participants across a wide range of occupational areas. And I think the main value these pilots have added is that we start to build in employer participation into the development of the content, so that we know it meets their needs. There's a number of core components, such, for example, professional technical qualification, level 2 English and mathematics, and an industry-based project, which we're going to do a little bit of more detail later on. Our ETI are undertaking a longitudinal evaluation of these pilots. We've had our first feedback session from them, and we've received very positive feedback, so we're very pleased with that. Phase 2 of the project, and this is when we're looking more towards the long-term system. And as we said, the work of the pilots has been really important to help inform this work and how we create an effective system. We've established a collaborative model to take forward this project, because we in government have knowledge of what we want the system to deliver, but we also need to bring in curriculum experts from different areas so we can support employers. So we've been working with curriculum experts from the FE sector, along with our future regulator, CCEA. We identified 10 priority occupational areas for new curriculum areas for 2016. We select these on the basis of areas of high existing demand, also building in future requirements from the skills barometer, and looking at what we're doing for level 3, so we have that progression pathway. We're presenting this initial curriculum development model with our strategic advisory forum later this month for our initial consultation, so we're looking forward to see what our stakeholders think of it. Very briefly, and just on the last slide on curriculum, this sets out essentially the high-level components that make up the traineeship offer. You'll see there at the top we've got what's called for now a regulated subject framework. That's what we're using so that we can build our requirements on national standards, but also add in our local employer needs, so we have that balance between portability and local ownership. As you've heard a couple of times, there's a dual focus here to meet both employer and participant requirements here now with the long-term foundation. We're using new learning and teaching techniques such as project-based learning, so it's not just acquisition of a qualification, it's actually developing those wider skills. And at that point, I'll pass across to my colleague David Broadhurst in pastoral support. Thank you.
Okay. As outlined in the Youth Training Strategy, there's a big focus on pastoral support and mentoring. So at the minute, we're devising a pastoral support and mentoring strategy for the traineeships. I think one of the things we found through that is there's a great need for pastoral support, but there isn't a one-size-fits-all for everybody. From going out and talking to people locally and doing a lot of the research, there's so many wide things that need to be considered. So it's a sort of movement from that. It has to be individual-led, I suppose, is what we've come to there. It can't just be, a blanket provision. But what the work is doing is looking to establish minimum requirements of providers who may deliver traineeships in the future, while still allowing them to go above and beyond that to deliver individual, for individual requirements. The sort of initial thinking we've had in that is that pastoral support and mentoring will be right through the traineeship system. It won't be an add-on, it won't be a bolt-on, it won't be something that sits to the right or the left. It'll be throughout it, so that's right from the start of the programme right through to the end. Some of the things I've picked up on as well would be the importance of, having an ecosystem of support for the providers, for the trainees. It's not just about what's provided within the training provider or what's provided there, but it's also having local support, local engagement, and deferring to people who have more expertise than you when that's required. So when this is finished, what we're going to do is incorporate all this within the strategy guidelines, and this will be used for when the providers come on board. In terms of the next slide about widening access, work has also commenced on a widening access strategy. The apprenticeship strategy put forward widening access as a policy commitment, and the youth training strategy is coming behind and picking that up as well. The Department's vision for widening access is that any qualified individual should be able to gain access for whatever is right for them, irrespective of personal or social background. And to this end, the Department is developing a range of financial and non-financial mechanisms from international and local best practice to encourage wider participation for those such as caring commitments, those with disability, those with care leavers, for example. If I could just pass you back.
Okay. Chair, Committee, we've given you a quick tour of our progress to date. As you can see, we have been making considerable progress. Maybe just in summary to share with you that we will be having the launch of our online portal to advertise opportunities, as I say, for youth training and apprenticeships. We envisage that being in September, and we'll be doing some testing around that. Obviously, the establishment of a permanent strategic advisory forum is very much on our radar at the minute, and we're working through that. The development, obviously, of further sectoral partnerships. Those are the groups that are tasked to finish, that are working with us to inform the curriculum, working with, obviously, they're employer-driven, employer membership, but also including curriculum experts, and our universities are part of that wider partnership. And we've been trying different modes of that, some that are more led by ourselves and Dale, linked to our working groups, but we have a few that are actually driven by employers, and we are testing different approaches to see which is the most successful. We will be extending those as we look at the priorities that Clement has shared and Phil earlier in terms of the curriculum, and trying to mirror those task to finish groups to align with the areas that we're developing at pace coming forward for September. As we shared earlier in our last presentation and our last attendance, our delivery model, we're coming forward with more detailed plans for that delivery model, which comprises further education, specialist employer training providers, and private and voluntary community sector training providers. And we will be holding, as I said at that last session, stakeholder engagement seminars to keep people up to speed with that. We are looking at that common delivery model moving forward. We've extended our contracts, as I shared with you, so that we made sure that we secured that confidence that our young people need, that we have a parallel process with our piloting new things. We continue with our existing provision to March 2017 in the form of apprenticeships, ANI and training for success, because we do need that transition and we do need to give that guarantee of stability for young people at this time. And we are continuing with our pilots with a view to full rollout from September 2017 of the new system. That's basically, I think, covered at a very speedy level what we've been doing today. So I just want to thank the committee for giving us the time, and maybe if we could now move on with questions. Maybe we'd like to give comfort. Obviously we would be keen to continue to engage. Obviously there'll be a new committee with the elections, but we would want to very much be part of this conversation with you, because I have to say to date our work both on the apprenticeship strategy and also on the youth training has been informed by your views and the feedback that you've given, and we're very, very thankful to you for giving your time to help inform policy going forward, and we would want to continue with that dialogue. So, Chair, over to yourself and members for questions.
Okay, thanks, Yvonne. In regards to your 16 pilots and the 250 participants, could you give us some feel of a breakdown as to courses, colleges?
Yeah, I suppose the courses are more about occupational areas, and we can provide the full list of the 16 approved pilots, their occupational areas, where they're based, and follow up to this committee session.
What stage are they at, Clem?
So they launched this September. Some of the pilots are 1 year, some of them are 2 years in length, and that really depends on the views the employers had on the ground that needed to be covered in their particular area. I think the big lesson is that young people have entered into those pilots from many different starting points. So when we're thinking about our new model, it's more about how we can support a broad range of support, how we can support the needs of different young people. So an individual-led approach, they're actually support to get that full programme rather than just following the same diet as they maybe would have done in other courses.
Just to confirm, the pilots are in engineering, ICT. That's moving forward. We've hairdressing pilots. Can we have a list of the actual?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've read it, many of them already today, but we can follow up with a table that just essentially shows you where they're at and in what occupational areas.
In regards then just to the widening access, in regards to the 4 key groups, I think is something we've all looked at, and how we engage with care leavers, disabilities and gender balance. Non-financial mechanisms, what do you mean?
I think we need to engage with employers to offer work-based learning opportunities and work experience. And as part of our wider piece of work, we're looking at how we might incentivise employers both through financial incentives, but there are other incentives. For example, we've looked at for apprenticeships, shared apprenticeships, where somebody comes in to manage and corral a series of employers to share work experience opportunities. That's the type of thing I'm looking at, how we might support employers to encourage them to give opportunities to young people to have tasters and have that work experience they need as part of this, whether they're in the non-employed route or in the employed route. So that's what we're talking about there. Because if we don't get the buy-in of employers, obviously that's critical in terms of meaningful work-based learning experience and opportunities, and particularly for people who may need additional support, or where engineering is a prime example where we would usually have more males than females, and we need to be looking at what non-monetary incentives we might use to try and get a better gender balance. Those are the type of things we'd be looking at.
Sorry, just to confirm that when you talk about the financial and non-financial mechanisms that are under consideration, those are for the employers rather than employees?
Well, part of it is to encourage employers, yes, it would be. David, do you want to add a wee bit to that?
No, I think also there'll be incentives in terms of, maybe not incentives the wrong word, but there'll be a lot of branding and marketing trying to attract people in as well, and we've even started that in the cover of the strategy, where we're trying to put all different groups, we're trying to encourage and present it well and show that when you come in, for example in the pastoral side I talk about, we're looking to establish there'll be a mentor for everybody, or access to a mentor, and I would like all those mentors and all the staff in the training providers to be, like, for example, disability aware, to be trained in that, to be aware of there'll be other such pastoral issues like addiction and so on. So there'll be other things to attract people in. You will have this support, you will have this access to such a mentor as you require it.
As well as employer buy-in, which is critical to this.
Okay, Jared.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks for the presentation, which I found very interesting indeed. think it's a critical piece. I mean, thinking about my own constituency of Foyle, there's a real need to engage with young people. We have a huge number of young people, NEETs, and people that are not engaged in the labour force. Particularly interested in the learning, the methodology around the learning here and the acquisition of the skills. You know, I think that focusing on a quality work-based learning experience, I think, is something that's very, very important. You know, a bit of a hobby horse of mine, that I do think there's a tendency sometimes to have a fixation around the acquisition of technical qualifications, and it's about people getting bits of paper, and we have lots of people with bits of paper, but it's about transcending that thing into the labour force then, that people can actually demonstrate that they can be productive and be part of the labour market. So it's about striking that balance, and I'm interested about, you know, the kind of skills that people do acquire, you know, even kind of tacit learning that people pick up in the workplace when they're there, as well as the technical skills that they need to work. So interested in that, or hearing a little bit more about it. I think the employer engagement piece of this is critical, because it's so important that you have a serious buy-in, because I think, Chair, that has the potential to actually influence how these young people might actually feel about particular professions or fields. You know, a bad experience in, you know, in some sort of work experience or a training program or a placement or internship can actually colour somebody's view of what it means to be whatever it is, you know, whether it's a hairdresser or whatever it might be, which is so there's quite a lot of responsibility riding on this in terms of that engagement piece, and I suppose that's where I'd be hoping, Chair, that we could kind of capitalise on the whole CSR bit, that people are serious about this. It's not just that they're bringing somebody on board because it's another pair of hands to help them out.
It's giving them skills.
It's about giving them a quality experience where they're actually, and they see the bigger picture in terms of how those people are going to be able to contribute to their profession or whatever it might be. Just on the online portal bit, I just wondered, and maybe that's just a mechanism to kind of roll out, but is there any e-learning opportunities within that? Because I'm just thinking in terms of young people, that obviously that's a medium that works very well for them and that they respond to.
As part of the work-based learning piece, we intend to test virtual work experience as well. Even in such areas as medicine, we've saw where doctors are now training online, even how they might virtually do heart surgery. So very much the colleges will be working on the providers as part of that to look at if we didn't have a good quality work-based experience for that young person, where we might do that or elements of that virtually through e-learning and through looking at how we might balance that with their hands-on skills, as well as obviously the more academic piece as well. But yes, we're definitely corralling that, but not necessarily through that online portal. That will be more for matching and advertising and seeing how young people can see opportunities and how we can change mindsets using the career service to try and put out that message out there. But in terms of virtual learning, there's definitely a role in terms of work-based learning, and in fact some of that would be more valuable than to go and have a bad work experience that doesn't link to the actual skills that the person needs for that occupational area. And part of our strategy includes through that central service how we might police that, because we need to be very careful and very mindful that we are putting young people into a work-based learning experience that is of value and is linked to the skill set for that occupational area. So a balance of all of those things.
That's where, Chair, I think the structure around the pastoral stuff is so important, that people are visited, that there is some sort of quality assurance about the experience, that early problems are picked up on, and that's why I think that almost like a buddying system where somebody can be, you know, teamed up with somebody that they can go to as a person that could resolve some of these early issues.
I think the strategy, and one of the things I've been working on, is what is called a workplace buddy. Yeah. And it will be a requirement for anybody that goes out to a workplace or employer that they will provide this role. And I think that's the very least, and this person should be experienced, be willing to do it. And one of the things I've heard from the young people about that, have the personality to do it as well, you know, that they're willing to engage, that they're helpful. They're not just allocated to the
This
young
isn't
person.
necessarily somebody on a higher level, because sometimes there's issues with that as well, about people not going to people because they think, oh, they're my supervisor, or this is somebody on the same level.
It's someone just who can help them and is willing to help them. I think this is the one thing I've got to come back from that.
Very good.
At a pilot level, we've saw that working even in some of the higher level apprenticeships, which are not part of obviously youth training, but that role in the work-based setting is so important in terms of mentoring and support on the right person who actually is given that one-to-one support to make sure the young person can ask the questions that they want to without feeling that, you know, the person's not approachable, and giving them the support if there's something that's worrying them or concerning, or if they need additional support even, that they have someone that they can communicate that to.
The only other final point I wanted to touch on was in terms of the 16 pilots.
Yes.
And I know you gave a flavour of the different sectors and stuff. Geographically, is there quite a spread across
Yes,
Northern
it's right
Ireland?
across Northern Ireland, isn't it, Clement?
Yeah.
Rural, urban, kind of.
I think all 6 colleges are involved in those pilots.
And
most
they're
of them have at least
represented
2.
right through all the counties, so.
Okay. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Okay, thank you, Jared. Anna?
Thank you, Chair. You said hairdressing is included in the traineeship, is that right? I suddenly recall a conversation with my hairdresser, whom I've been going to for years, and she's wonderful, in Belfast. She told me not that long ago when I asked her about trainees, she used to get trainees, she said, but it stopped, it's dried up. The majority of courses are now full-time in FE colleges. And what she was advocating was that the trainees, the students in colleges, they would only practice in their own salons. They don't get the same number of customers, and also at the end of their course, there is no guarantee of any job. They would have to go out and apply for jobs. Whereas if a trainee goes to her and work with them, you know, in her salon for a while, very often at the end of her course, she would employ the person.
Yes.
But she said that stopped.
I think it's interesting to hear that feedback. I know we've about, it's one of the numbers, do you remember there's about 35 young people doing a hairdressing traineeship in the Belfast area. And what you've described is one of the reasons why we're trying to encourage this new traineeship avenue, so we do build in work-based learning as an integral part of a programme rather than something that's separate.
Our success through this will be that when the young person goes in to get work experience as part of their baccalaureate, that they may be employed, and in which case they still complete their qualification through the employed route. That's what the beauty of the design of this is, and we are confident that once we get the message out in our marketing right, that employers will really be interested, because it's really beneficial. They get someone working in their business, learning their skills through work experience, and it may in many cases prove that they actually said, I'd like this person to stay on, I've invested time on it.
Yeah, this is it. Yeah, and then, you know, they've seen how well they've fitted in, and that's very important. You know, the buddy system, I think, is very important, that the young person going in build up a rapport, you know, with someone else. And the traineeship lasts for 1 year, is that right?
Well, I think the strategy says up to 2 years. As I said, one of the main lessons is we've got some pilots that are currently 1 year and some that are 2, and that's governed by the content that employers said the young people need to cover. When we look at the cohort coming through, they all have very different starting points, so I think we need to think how we can support individual learning paths so that everybody is supported to get the full outcome rather than just a set process.
Sure. I know for hairdressing, I think a lot of FD colleges, their courses are for 2 years. I was at, and I think Claire was at the same thing, with young women on Monday in the Long Gallery. We have about 200 young women from the Youth Project over and meeting female MIAs as role models, and it was good meeting them. But a lot of them want to do hairdressing or in hairdressing. Do we need that many hairdressers?
Well, I think in every town that you go into in Northern Ireland, there could be 3 to 4 hairdressers, so there seems to be demand. Many diversify and also do hair and beauty. And obviously we know, not me personally, but a lot of ladies like their nails and massages. So yes, I think there is. It seems to be a popular
because
occupation.
so many of them.
That's one of the things.
They talk to us about what they're doing, and they also they want to do hairdressing.
This is a demand-led model. If there are no jobs, we won't be putting somebody through a traineeship. We will be looking at trying to match that demand. And obviously, I think Minister, I heard him earlier speak about the skills barometer. We'll be very mindful of all this, and that's why Clement was sharing earlier some of our priorities for the pilots. We're trying to better match where employment will be. I have to say, hair is very popular, and there seems to be a demand for it at the moment.
Many of the providers involved in hairdressing have very good outcomes when it comes to employment following it. So, as I've always said, one of the main attractions of apprenticeships and traineeships, if employers aren't interested, if there aren't jobs, there's no place. So
I have to say, though, I persuaded her to let her daughter not go into hairdressing, but go into Queen's to do a degree, and she just loves it. She's 2nd year in her law degree.
That's excellent.
The mother wanted her to go to hairdressing to take over, I think, the business out to make play, but I said she's bright. very bright, let her do what she wanted to do.
And we shouldn't underestimate the hairdresser either, in that the chemicals that they work for, you do need a number of skills and strong literacy and numeracy, or I think we would maybe be at casualty if that wasn't the case.
No,
so we need to bear that in
no,
mind.
I'm not saying that they're not. I mean, the mother is a great businesswoman. So I'm sure she runs the place well, and good business for her too. Yeah.
Alan, do you want to name them? See if you get it.
No.
Okay, Tom, you can.
Just one very quickly. Out of the 16 pilots, have you employer buy-in for the 16 pilots you're running?
We had I suppose a process very similar to the HLAs that required evidence in each proposal of the engagement that had occurred with employers to show that this met their needs, not just a couple of employers, but it met a broad range of employer needs. And that's a process we'll continue to sort of sharpen as we move towards establishing a steady state model. Where there were sector partnerships established, they were engaged in that process as well, and where they weren't, it was really on kind of the basis of evidence. For example, we recently approved a pilot for civil engineering, and along with the proposal, there was a series of employer endorsements on how this met the broad range of their needs. So that was, I think, one of the main drivers and the main kind of things that sets us apart from some of our other provision.
Well, then you have 250 participants here. At the end of the pilots, what's the anticipation of getting, many of these 250 into the employment with the employers that showed an interest, or?
Yeah, I mean, we're very keen to find out at the end to see how that conversion works. We've already had a couple of people who have left the programme successfully to, onto our apprenticeship NI, onto our apprenticeship NI programme. So, as Yvonne said, once we actually get the pathways fully developed, they'll be able to maintain their place in the programme and not have to move into a new programme. So it supports that simplicity.
And I don't think it's the only barometer of success here. We do need to bear in mind the balance between the needs of the employer and the individual. Some young people will choose to go into further study at level 3 and have their qualification recognised. So, you couldn't use that as a blunt instrument to measure success.
I appreciate that. Once they get to that level, they may well think, well, I'll go on from here.
Thanks, Tom. Okay. Yvonne.
Thank you,
very
Chair.
much. Thank you very much. Thanks again. Thank you.
Members.
All the best.
Yes, thank you.
Members, while we are at court, can I skip the agenda item 10, which is the Committee for Employment and Learning Legacy Report. Members is tabled at page 16. Chance to have a look through it. In line with guidance issued by the Clerk Assistance Office, the Clerk will complete factual information at the date of dissolution issues such as members, any concerns arising out of the legacy report?
I just want to complain, my picture's not in it. Only joking.
We'll see what we can do, Anna.
Only joking.
Just to say, and I can kind of say this objectively because I wasn't involved, I think it was very impressive, the stuff that the committee has done over the years in terms of its achievements. So I'm not bigging up myself, I'm just, I think it's very good in terms of what you've done and the volume of work you've done.
Yeah. I'm impressed by the number of visits.
Yeah. We got out. Do you want to speak or just?
Yeah, the Minister in his briefing this morning, he mentioned an extra item that I haven't got in yet, Assured Skills Programme, so I just want to put that in at the first set of bullet points on page 25. And then in the second point, group of bullet points, the Minister talked about gender inequality, so I wanted to add that in because that's not in either.
Yeah.
Members content?
First class.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, members.
Yeah.
We agree to publish the legacy report then?
Yeah. Yeah.
Members, moving back then, agenda item 9, departmental briefing review of leadership and management. Can I just welcome Ms. June Ingram and Mr. June Ingram, Director of Skills and Industry Division, Mr. Raymond McCauley, Skills Development Branch. June, Raymond, you are very welcome. Members, this is page 57.
Okay.
Okay, June, yes, over to yourself.
Thank you very much. If it's okay, I'll take you through the slides I think that you should have in your pack, all being well.
Page 57, members.
Okay.
So thank you very much for this opportunity to update you on our review of leadership and management. It's an update really on work in progress. We're moving towards the end of it, and have some emerging findings, so it's an opportunity to let you know about these and get your views. You received a paper last June which told you about the commencement of the review, and as I said, we're now in the latter stages of it. So moving on to the background to the review, as we know, for some time effective leadership and management has been known to be directly linked to business performance, and leadership and management is an important theme on all of those key strategies that we've referenced in that slide. Of course, Leading to Success in 2007 was the first strategy that specifically looked into what could be done to develop leadership and management in Northern Ireland companies. On the next slide, in terms of supporting sources, we also have a range of supporting sources to inform us in terms of the importance of leadership and management development and those issues, such as the Management Matters in Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland report by McKinsey in 2009, which gave us a significant measure of the potential tangible benefits that were associated with improved leadership and management. And it made a key statement that globally research indicates that when management practices are rated on a scale from 1 to 5, a 1-point increase in management practices is associated with an increase in industrial output equivalent to that produced by a 25% increase in labour or 65% increase in capital. So it's a really important message to have out there. And McKinsey also pointed out that globally it can be the relatively high number of firms with poor management practices that drives down the average national score of a low-ranking country. We also have the GB-focused Leadership and Management Skills in SMEs report by BIS, that's Department for Business Innovation and Skills, last year, which provided more evidence to support the view that we need to improve management practices. But we also know that there is a wide range of provision to enable companies to do this. And in the next slide, just set out some examples of existing provision. The Dell Leadership and Management Programmes, we have a range there, and also have to say that those programmes are coming to or have come to their natural contractual end, so it's timely now to take stock, look at the outcomes of the review, look to the new Department for the Economy, and look at what's the best range of provision to put in place and who should deliver it. We also have Invest NI programmes, the provision by the FE colleges, the higher education institutions, and a very wide range of provision provided by private sector providers in terms of all those sorts of functional skills, mentoring, coaching, and support for leadership and management. Okay, the next slide talks about the economic context for the review. As you know, it's an important, leadership management is an important element in the economic strategy, and we know that Northern Ireland has a high percentage of small and micro businesses, with 98% having less than 50 members of staff. So it's very important, as we have done, to ensure that smaller companies' needs are not excluded in the review, as they're the bedrock of the economy. And we would expect that emerging recommendations will contain measures to ensure that we help smaller Indigenous and micro-sized companies while also addressing the needs of larger exporting companies. And of course, all this has to be set within the current financial context. On the next slide, just reiterating that the economic development goals of the strategy, the economic strategy, call for us to have an updated understanding of what support and development leaders and managers require, including those consideration of new and emerging developments and the challenges facing local companies. So, as I said, it's timely to take stock, especially as we've come, hopefully, through recession into recovery, to what we should take forward into the future. And there's some themes from the Northern Ireland Economic Strategy which are important, such as the likely significant increase in demand for leadership and management capability based on the pending reduction in corporation tax, and its likely positive effect on companies' appetite to become more competitive and increase investment in areas like R&D and exporting, and the potential attraction of a larger number of foreign direct investment companies, but also, of course, the need to encourage and underpin the growth of innovative exporting Indigenous small to medium-sized companies in Northern Ireland. So to support these aims, effective leadership management at all company levels will be necessary. And in conducting the review, it's become very clear that there's a pressing need to ensure that all staff engaged in leadership management are themselves fully aware of this goal and their role in achieving it for the Northern Ireland. Communication of that vision will be the key to progress. So just recapping on the aim of the review of leadership and management was to develop the vision and strategic direction needed to improve management and leadership skills within the Northern Ireland economy. And we've set out there the range of objectives for the review, which I won't read in detail. It comes some 6 years after leading to success, and the skills strategy as well, Success Through Skills, Transforming Futures, also included the theme alongside the wider examination of skills issues. And as I said before, we need to bear in mind that Northern Ireland has changed significantly since those 8 years, and the economic strategy has generated an understanding of that ambition for Northern Ireland to take its place in the future, especially in areas like FDI, growth and exporting. The government funding landscape also needs to be taken into account, and its impact on the budget that's going to be available for leadership and management initiatives. So in terms of the conducting of the review, a slide there that sets out the associated review objectives that focus at the strategic level on understanding what the current issues are, evaluating where possible the impacts that the skills delivery in this area have had, examining barriers and areas of need, and very importantly, trying to determine what future provision should look like and to be clear on roles and responsibilities. So all this is pointing us in the direction that the development of new programmes should be set within the context of an organised, coherent framework with a clear focus as well on qualifications going forward. So just in terms of the progress since last June on the review, since the initiation of the project last summer, we formed a project board which included strategic level expertise from DE, from DETI, from InvestNI and from our economist or analytical colleagues in the department. And the board has met throughout the project, and there's been a lot of communication with the members of the board. We appointed a firm to take forward the research project to provide up-to-date supporting survey and qualitative data, and the research phase is almost complete. We're moving into now completing the research phase and project board consideration. So in terms of the research phase, just to go through the detail, the researchers were appointed in September. There's been a wide range of engagement with key stakeholders in education and industry. There's been a survey of companies in Northern Ireland, and the sample included companies of all sizes and sectors, and we're moving close to completion of that. So moving on then perhaps more to the meat of the emerging themes. The review team, we're now working to collate the views of the project board, looking at the research and to prepare a strategic recommendations paper for the Minister. So a number of themes are emerging, and we felt it was important to update the committee on these broad areas. So first of all, the importance of awareness raising. Why should companies develop leadership and management skills? We need to ensure that there's important or increased focus on the value of and on promotion of the benefits of leadership and management development, so that more companies get involved in it and see the tangible benefit of doing so. There needs to be real clarity on the roles and responsibilities of all involved, looking towards maybe a future strategic framework, setting out who should be involved and what their roles should be, bearing in mind key organisations like councils, higher and further education, and InvestNI, as well as the new Department for the Economy. Bearing in mind as well that there is a very wide range of provision already available, and one of the issues is for companies to understand what's there and how they can access it and what's the best provision for them. So this also relates quite clearly to the form and the functions of the new department and its delivery and partner bodies. So that became more and more clear as we have gone through the process of the review, that it's something that will feed very clearly and effectively into the new department. So, as I said, in terms of leadership and management provision, companies and stakeholders consulted were not necessarily critical of provision in itself, and there is a wide range available, but we are getting the view that there could be better understanding in the business sector about what support is available and where it might be sourced. And then in order to access that provision and to address this perceived uncertainty of where to access it, there's an emerging suggestion of improved online provision to facilitate signposting to available programmes or initiatives. And also, there should be consideration of how to facilitate a continuous or clear pathway for those smaller companies, those micro businesses that are starting on the growth journey, to access appropriate leadership and management development opportunities, looking at best practice, things that have worked for them, learning from that. And also there's a perceived confidence gap in many small to medium enterprises, and there's a view that networking and fora that facilitate those companies to come together, to learn from each other and to get best practice should be encouraged. And also we know there's a growing number of successful people who are originally from Northern Ireland who are working in leadership positions in global businesses overseas. So there's an idea about how we should engage and utilise that group to develop leadership talent back home, if you like. Just then, in terms of the last slide, in going forward, there's a series of factors that we know now we need to take into account. We need to look at skills to ramp up entrepreneurship as an important element of the aims of the economic strategy. We need those skills to support and attract foreign direct investment, also deriving from the economic strategy. And also some new emerging issues, the challenges and opportunities of the widespread use of internet and digital business technologies. So we have the need to manage varying levels of technological competence, as well as the opportunity for innovative leadership and management training technologies. There's been a suggestion that we should make the most of, I think it's the baby boomers and the millennials, bring them together. The wisdom of the baby boomers and the technological expertise of the millennials can really be used to good effect. So also then that links to the generational differences in the workplace, where there are management issues across a widening range of skill sets and generational influences. But also the importance of qualifications and accreditation as an important measure, and to ensure that there are appropriate levels of leadership and management skills. And also how best to build a stock of future talent, looking at the importance of graduate or internship programmes. And finally, ensuring that leadership and management provision assists in tackling gender imbalances at senior levels. For example, looking at different approaches to providing support for women. So finally, as I said, our next steps will be to draw the information together and develop strategic recommendations. I think looking forward we'll be focusing on three main areas: the why it's important to undertake leadership management development, where we can, or businesses can access that, and then what is the best course to follow to suit your needs and your business. And that's where we're at, and I hope that has been helpful. Happy to take questions and comments, of course.
Okay, thanks, June. Very intensive piece of work, June, but
Yes.
necessary, you know, to really, because without the leaders and management, the rest of it's really pointless to dive industry. In regards to the Dell-funded leadership programmes that you spoke about that had reached their natural end, I think was your, do you see a place for those, or is there enough external provision there?
I think that when we look at things like graduate and internship programmes, when we look at how best to target small and medium-sized enterprises, I think we need to make sure that there will be no gaps there going forward into the new department. Now, maybe there's a transitional phase so that we ensure there's no gap until functions, roles and delivery is sorted out fully. But can't say entirely at this point in time what will continue or what will be reinstated.
And then, in regards, I suppose, your emerging themes, the value of leadership, engaging the Northern Ireland diaspora, is that something that has commenced? Is it something that has somebody come to you and said, we would like to get involved at this stage?
It's an idea which I think has been inspired by what they've done in Scotland. The Saltire programme, where they've looked at Scots who've gone abroad and brought them back. So it's really an emerging idea, but we haven't talked through how we might put that into practice. But there's certainly lots of networks out there that we could...
And those stories are so important to bring home, success stories, how people have made it in the global context. And it really does, it's a shot in the arm for young companies, and perhaps those companies that are in the lower stages of growth journey, to hear how others have done it and succeeded.
It's that understanding of the combination of skills that makes a manager and leader. You know, it's the strategic thinking, the leadership, the executive skills, and that personal effectiveness. So hearing from others how they did it, I think, could be really important.
That's right. Jared?
Well, thanks, Chair, and thanks for the presentation. I think it's hard to overstate the importance of this kind of work, because I think it's not only about ensuring that we have businesses and organisations that function and are more progressive, but also within those, I suppose, charging the leaders of the future that might go on from those organisations to manage other organisations, and in turn that will have, I suppose, a stimulating effect upon our economy in terms of the overall scheme of things. So I think it's important work to do, because there is a risk within any business or organisation that they can become complacent and that they don't perhaps use best practice and have the standards that we should all aspire to. I mean, I'm thinking about things, Chair, like and I don't know how it kind of sits with this, but the investors in people thing, which I've seen examples of with organisations where they really have had a structure, Chair, where they can build something around and knowing the key themes and the areas where they have to concentrate on. And I suppose the competitive drive around that to acquire the different levels in at the end. So how does that set something? I know that's maybe not directly related to what you're doing, but how do you see something like that in comparison to what this review is trying to...
Investors and people maybe should have mentioned it, but it is an important component of that sort of suite of programmes, and it's about high performance working, probably is the best way to describe it. It's people management, involving people and being, as a leader, able to engage people. So as a company, IIP helps people management and good HR practices, but then it's the managers and the leaders who drive that we want to get that through our programmes.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's an excellent framework, and it's been used in the past actually in one of our other programmes, MAP, Management Analysis and Planning, which was structured around that whole organisational framework used by investors and people model. It's been superbly successful, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Stuart. June, Raymond, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Okay, members, agenda item 11, any other business? Members, if not, date, time and place of next meeting, 10 a.m. Wednesday, 16th of March, room 29. I just remind members of our informal meeting this afternoon, room 144, 2:30 with the Minister in regard to party. Meeting's adjourned.